Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 10th regular meeting of the Walnut Creek Planning Commission. Our very first order of business tonight will be to extend a warm welcome to our new colleague and newest member of the Planning Commission, Pam Needing. Welcome, Pam. Good to have you here. And at this time, I'll ask Commission Secretary Andy Smith to please call the roll.
Certainly. Commissioner Needing,
Present.
Commissioner Lezak,
Here.
Commissioner Pickett,
Here.
Commissioner Strongman,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Reiser,
Here.
and Commissioner Ward is absent tonight. We have a quorum with 6.
Thank you for that. The next order of business this evening involves a bit of housekeeping, the election of a new chair. So we have the large, figuratively and literally, shoes of former Chair Kraselic to fill tonight. So at that, I'm going to put it to my fellow colleagues here to either nominate or...
I'd like to nominate you, Steve, for chair.
Second.
I accept. Thank you for that.
Paul?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is to, let me write this down here. Yep. Commissioner Needing? It'd be aye or no if you want to vote on the motion.
Aye.
Commissioner Lezak?
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett?
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Reiser?
Yes.
All right, Chair Reiser, let's turn on the pomp and circumstance. You can take your tassel to the other side of your mortar board. I will pass you the chairperson.
Thank you much. Look at that.
There we go.
Oh, boy. First order of business is to break it. Already promoted. Look at that. Thank you for that. Thank you to my fellow commissioners for your trust. I look forward to working with you for another year, and hopefully I will be able to fill those shoes once again. Next order of business is to nominate and select a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Melissa Ward. Oh. I would like to nominate Melissa Ward. Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Can we call for the vote?
Certainly, Commissioner Needing,
Yes.
Commissioner Lezak,
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Reiser,
Yes.
and the motion carries 6-0, and you can slide the vice chairperson over to the vacant seat.
See what happens when you miss a meeting.
That actually happened to me at a committee a few weeks ago. I will say, though, that I did speak with Commissioner Ward, on the phone or text, I forget which, and she did express interest in it, so no surprise.
Very good. Here we go then. Next up on our agenda is the consent calendar, and seeing no consent calendar, we will move on to public communications. This public communications portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer items to staff. Does any member of the public wish to provide public comments at this time, the items not on the agenda?
And I would add to that, if for people attending via Zoom, if they do wish to speak, please press the raise hand button, or if they're connected by phone, dial *9.
Seeing no one in the chamber, we'll wait for a minute on the phone, or anybody on the phone?
There's nobody's raising their hand on Zoom.
Very good. Moving on. Next item on our agenda is public hearings. We'll start by asking if any member of the commission has had any ex parte communications related to items on this evening's agenda. Commissioner Pickett.
Yeah, I had some discussions with Haley Crawford.
Anybody else? Very good. That said, we will bring up Haley Crawford, Senior Planner, for a staff presentation. Haley, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is
Okay.
Tapping works. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Haley Crawford, a senior planner here with the city. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting the Montego Senior Living Project. It's at 1455 Montego, and they're seeking approvals tonight of 2 conditional use permits and tree removal permits. So just to orient us for some site context, 1455 Montego is located on Montego, on the south side of Montego, just south of the John Muir Hospital campus, surrounded by medical office use across Montego, and then residential on the north, south, and west property lines. Here's some images of the existing building. The existing former medical office building is 2 stories. It's currently primarily vacant. There is one use, medical office use, that uses it periodically throughout the week, 2,000 square feet of it. The site has a access driveway off Montego that leads to parking off that access drive and a larger parking area at the rear. And so tonight, the applicant is seeking approvals to establish a residential care facility, which will include a remodel of the existing office building, including a 4,860 square foot rear addition. The total square foot proposed would be 26,571, and the project would result in 19 assisted living units and 20 memory care units with a total of 78 beds. They're proposing 40 parking stalls, proposing to remove 9 trees, and will include new site landscaping as well. So the project was previously before the Design Review Commission back in February for a study session. The Design Review Commission provided some minor comments to be addressed at final design review, but did pass along a positive recommendation to the Planning Commission on the items before you tonight. So tonight we're here again seeking your approvals on the conditional use permits. One, to establish a residential care facility in the OC zone. A second one, to modify the existing building, which is considered legal non-conforming due to its height. I'll go into that a little bit more detail. And then tree removal permits. And if approved tonight, it would move forward to the Design Review Commission for final approval on the exterior building remodel, the landscaping, and the color material palette. Here's an existing site plan showing the location of the existing building, that driveway access with the parking surrounding the perimeter. And here's a diagram that just kind of shows, to orient us, the existing building in that kind of tan brown color, and the addition portion in orange. So the ground floor on the bottom and the second floor on the top. And so the proposed residential care facility would obviously, occupy primarily the location of the existing building with that rear addition, as well as keep the site circulation consistent with the consistent driveway access as it is today, and parking at the rear and surrounding the south side of that property line. And just a proposed second floor plan for some context. Some renderings, again, just to orient us for what the project would look like. Obviously, details subject to final design review approval. So the first request before the commission tonight is the conditional use permit to establish the residential care facility in the office commercial zone. The standard conditional use permit findings are required, and staff believes that these can be met for the reasons stated here. The project will activate a primarily vacant office building. It also complements the existing mix of uses in the area, and staff feels that it's compatible. And although it is a 24-hour facility, staff notes that all of their organized activities, including both indoor and outdoor activities, will only occur during daylight hours, so it will not cause a disruption to the adjacent uses. And the second conditional use permit would be to modify a legal non-conforming building. The existing building was built in the 70s, and the height is 29 feet. The height limit of the zone is 25 feet. And so on the screen here, the upper image is the previously approved, the as-built building, and that red dashed line shows that 29-foot height limit. And the image below is the proposed condition. And so this shows that the applicant is proposing to maintain that 9-foot height limit. They will modify the parapet design to meet their current remodel needs. And they actually are adding some additional variation to the parapet with introducing those kind of bays that articulate the roof line. And so staff is supportive of this request, not only because it does provide variety to this building. You'll also note that the rear addition, which is to the right of that image, does meet the 25-foot height limit. So anything new in this case would conform to the zone. There are some additional findings that need to be made to approve a conditional use permit to modify a legal non-conforming building, being that it will not impair the character of the zone or lead to an alteration in the purpose or intent of the zone, will improve the general appearance or economic vitality of the district, and finally, that it's unlikely that the building would ever be converted to a conforming structure. And again, staff feels that all these findings can be made for several of the reasons I already mentioned. I will also mention that in order to convert this structure to a conforming structure, it would involve a complete demo and rebuild. And finally, the last item tonight before you is tree removal requests. So there are currently 18 trees on the property. 9 of them are being proposed for removal. The consulting arborist, the applicant submitted an arborist report, and then our consulting arborist has reviewed that. And due to all of the 9 trees' current condition and health, as well as impacts of this development, the consulting arborist is supportive of the removal. Tree protection measures for the remaining trees have also been included as conditions of approval. And I'll just mention that 21 new trees are being planted as part of the new landscape plan. And then the last item I'll bring up is the environmental review. Staff is recommending that this project meets the qualifications of an infill exemption. These 5 items have been included in the staff report, and here showing that it's consistent with the OC zone. The site is less than 5 acres and has no value as a habitat to endangered plants or animal species, will not generate any significant effects to traffic, noise, and air quality, and is currently being served by all utilities. I do want to mention that we did receive 3 pieces of public correspondence tonight. Copies have all been provided to the commissioners, posted online, as well as available at the back of the room. I did want to mention one item that was brought up, I think, in majority of the correspondence, and that's this issue of a 8-foot tall solid masonry sound wall. And so I did want to just clarify that the code requires whenever you have a non-residential use that abuts a residential use, and in this case, a residential care facility is actually considered a community use, so not residential. The code requires that an 8-foot tall sound attenuating masonry wall be installed at the property lines. And so the areas shown here in red would be the locations that the code would require that wall. And so the project would be required to install this wall. There is an allowance in the code for an applicant to request a waiver or a reduction from this requirement. If they did choose to do that, it would be considered by our zoning administrator. But at this time, the applicant has not made any formal recommendation. But in order to provide a little more clarity on this, staff has provided a recommended red line revision to attachment 1 tonight. And that also has been provided for your review, but I've included up here simply adding clarity to a condition which already reads essentially that the development shall comply with all conditions and requirements of the city, adding clarity that that also includes the requirement for this masonry wall unless otherwise waived by the zoning administrator. So I did just want to clarify that. I know that came up in several of the public comments tonight. And so finally, I'll end with staff's recommendation. We're recommending tonight that the commission approve the proposed resolutions adopting a conditional use permit, or approving a conditional use permit to allow the residential care facility use, a conditional use permit to allow the modification of the non-conforming building, and then approve the tree removal request for the 9 trees. I'm here tonight if you have any questions. I'll also mention that we have Colette Hanna in the room. She is our economic development manager and here to answer any questions for you as well. And our applicant team is joining on Zoom.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Haley. Commissioner questions?
Do one question. In the staff report, you talked about that in the future we'll need 200,000 square feet of new office space in that area. Where are we going to find that? I know that doesn't quite apply to this particular property, but it looks fairly well developed through there.
I'll actually invite maybe Colette Hannah to come up and answer that question. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Colette Hannah, Economic Development Manager. So that is based on a study that we are conducting that was driven by the construction of the oncology, the development of the Oncology Center. So we commissioned Jones Lang LaSalle, a real estate development firm and brokerage firm and consulting in real estate, and especially focused on medical office buildings. And so they are basically looking at what the demand could be based on the construction and the development of the Oncology Center. So that 200,000 square feet is based on demand generated by the Oncology Center. So that could be in that area, that could be along YVR, in that area, that could be at Shadelands. There could be any number of areas existing and building out that kind of development to accommodate what they estimate as the demand.
So in other words, somewhere in Walnut Creek, it doesn't.
Oh,
have to
yeah,
be
for
right-
sure. Yeah. Yes, in close proximity, I believe it was within a mile that they suggested that they could see a need for that much square footage based on the development of the Oncology Center.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colette. Anybody else? Any other questions? Commissioner Pickett.
Yeah, on that study, at least the staff report said that it was the 200,000 square feet, but that would be insufficient, that there's insufficient office space available.
Currently.
So how do we justify eliminating 20,000 square feet office space when we already know that we aren't going to make it in the long run?
Right. So the medical office study is looking obviously broadly, and we also asked them to look at this particular property. And that study, I should mention, is still in draft form, so we'll be happy to bring back the full study once it's completed. But just looking at this particular property, one of the things that was kind of looked at, in actually several different factors, was the location of this in proximity to the hospital, to the oncology center, the other properties that are along YVR. This one just wasn't viewed as competitively strong for the medical demand or the office demand that would be generated by that oncology center. So what we're basically kind of looking at is just not setting a precedent for transitioning and changing the use of these types of properties, given that kind of demand that could be generated. But this particular property at this location, with the investments that would have to be made in order to bring it up to par for medical office use currently, we didn't see a problem with this particular property, given the other competitive factors of other buildings in the area as well.
Is there land available to develop 20,000 square feet office space somewhere else? I don't think there is, but
Yeah, we will be looking at YVR, so the frontage of YVR, as well as Shadelands for that 200,000 square feet that
okay,
could be
so
developed.
Shadelands would be within the sphere that the consultant believes is adequate for the services supporting the John Muir development.
Exactly, yes, yes. They're within the area as well as extending out to Shadelands.
Okay, I haven't looked recently. Does Shadelands still have a pretty high vacancy rate, or do you know what the vacancy rate in Shadelands is currently?
It depends on if you're looking at medical. Medical is fairly low. Office in general is, our estimates are between 15 to 17% or so for just general office. There are interests that we're seeing from different developers in developing in that area, in the Shadelands area, as well as I mentioned, along YVR, the frontage of YVR. So it might take, either looking at existing buildings and doing some renovations to those, or building new where that opportunity is available.
Okay, and considering the existing inventory, there's two huge buildings that are between Ignacio and Montego that are vacant. Do you know what the square footage of those buildings are?
I don't. There are about 13 buildings in that area. So I'd have to look at which specific ones you're referring to.
Haley, do you know? I drive by them every day. They're big they're, what are they, see-through floors, you know, nothing's in there.
The ones on the corner of Montego and YVR?
Yeah, there's one right on the corner, and then there's another building in between, and there's, I guess, the sister building to it, and both those are vacant. They used to be Wilson.
1200 Montego, I believe 1250 and 1350. It's those corner.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers to see exactly what the square
do you
footage of
know-
those are.
Yeah, do you know what the square footage available in Shalen's is? Of that 17, what is 17% vacancy or 15%?
One of the things that we're also doing is an office property study to look at office availability. So to get that exact number for you, I'd have to go back and look at that study to see the square footage available.
Okay, and another question on the report. There was a reference in, I think in the staff report, that talks about long-term demand. What is the time frame for long-term demand? Is that 2 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Over 10 years.
So it's long-term
10 years
demand.
plus.
So the report is saying that there will be a need for 200,000 square feet of office space over a period exceeding a 10-year period,
Right, exactly.
during which time there's going to be a lot of dynamics with a lot of things, so.
Right, and this is looking specifically at what would be driven by the oncology center. That's what we asked them to study.
And they're about ready to gear up, right? The oncology center?
The last date that I heard is early 2024,
Oh,
that they're expected to be completed
Okay, so
with their
we're still 2
construction.
years off on that, okay. Okay, let's see if I have any other questions. I think one. Et cetera.
The
Medical office use versus the proposed use?
Yep, the applicant did some they did some VMT analysis. They also did some general analysis that our traffic engineering department required. In terms of trip generation, the residential care facility use is actually much lower than the office use would be, obviously if it was not vacant, but it is a much lower generating use for traffic.
That's all my questions.
Great, thank you. Any others? Commissioner Anderson?
The letter from Ms. Cannon regarding the 8 to 10 foot high sound wall, is there any reason to believe that this proposed facility would be any noisier or more disruptive than an office use, assuming that we're not all vacant?
Not significantly. I think, being a residential care facility in terms of most of the activities during the day, similar to an office, the applicant did provide kind of an operations plan, which shows they don't have any activities during the nighttime hours. They do obviously, though, have kitchen facilities, general service facilities, so there will be delivery trucks, trash pickup trucks, which an office building would also likely have. So I don't think it's going to be significantly different or more so than the office building. I will mention that this requirement in the code for this 8-foot tall sound wall is for any non-commercial, when a non-commercial use abuts a residential. And so, there are areas, in our city such as this where, technically the existing use also would have qualified for that. Obviously, when it was built, this requirement was likely not around. But it does kind of serve a broad range of situations it's meant to cover.
Okay. The other question I had was on the question of whether the decision here would serve as a precedent. How exactly does that work? What is the process for saying, well, we're going to decide it this way, but it's not a precedent? I mean, is another applicant come and say, you did this for these folks, and you said it's not a precedent, but you did it for them, why can't we? Is there a procedure for, refusing to allow it to be a precedent?
Can I just clarify, are you asking specifically about the wall or the use, the conversion of the use?
Well, any precedent, I guess. This is a more general question.
So the office commercial zone just generally says a conditional use permit is permitted for this residential care facility use. So this application is not necessarily seeking any sort of additional path that any other application wouldn't. So essentially, if a similar situation were to happen in the office commercial zone, it would come back, to the Planning Commission, and you would be asked kind of the exact same, to make the exact same set of findings. And so given the context of that application, you may or may not find that you could make those findings. So I think in terms of setting a precedence, we're really just looking at this specific location. And I think from what Colette was also mentioning, the analysis that was done for this specific location did show that there are some unique, kind of less competitive features, which maybe another site would have some more competitive advantage.
Okay, thank you.
You want to chime in on that? Okay, very good. Anybody else? All right, so at this point, we will open the public hearing and invite the applicant up. If they so wish, they have up to 15 minutes to present. Oh, or on, rather. They're on Zoom, right?
Yes, and Haley's going to bring them in. And that's the applicant, right?
Yes.
There we go. Can we hear him?
I suppose it's time for me to talk now. I'm sorry.
You're on.
I am on. So I am the architect for the applicant. I'm Doug Pancake, Douglas Pancake Architects. And just by way of introduction, I have a very unusual architectural practice. All I do is senior living and healthcare across the United States. I'm licensed in 16 states, I think. Last time I checked, I lose track. My offices are in Irvine, California. My experience has blessed me and afforded me the ability to sit on some state advisory committees, both for OSHPD and for the State Fire Marshal's Office. I sit on the RCF, Residential Care Facility Code Advisory Committee. I also volunteer a lot of my time for the California Assisted Living Association. So my entire life's work and life's passion is serving our elders and designing environments for the elderly. This is a great project, I believe. I think Dr. and Mita Anand are great clients. It's a small project, which is ideal for our residents. I want to really compliment you and your staff. Haley has been a fantastic planner. I think you should give her a raise. I'm not going to need all 15 minutes. She's done a wonderful job presenting the project, but I will say that we've designed this project with the residents' experience and well-being first. Impact on the neighborhood and operational considerations second. But I will say and qualify that these projects really do have the lowest environmental impact on a neighborhood of any project that I can consider other than maybe a park. So they self-police, they shut down at 8 o'clock, there's no noise. And there's a running joke in our industry that when a delivery driver pulls onto the property, that there are several folks looking out their window, concerned and policing and ready to report it to their care staff. So it is a residential care facility for the elderly. It's licensed by the Department of Social Services, and there will be staff on site providing supervision and care for these folks 24/7. Pursuant to the operational standards, which will exceed licensing standards. So I know that some of you have seen this project before. I know some of you haven't. I don't want to offer any more than what Haley has already provided you because she's done an excellent job. And I would like to make myself available for questions or discussion.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any questions from the commissioners for the architect? Commissioner Pickett.
Just a couple of quick ones. What is the typical duration of the stay for a resident? Do they stay pretty long term, or are they in for convalescence and out in 10 days, 2 weeks, or something like that? What is?
No. It will not be short-term turnaround stays. And so we have two levels of care here. One is for assisted living folks who are cognitively intact, and one is for assisted living folks who require a memory care. So the memory care residents will stay an average of 3 to 4 years, typically. and they'll expire in this residential environment. The assisted living folks, I don't want to speculate on an average stay, but it's probably 5 to 6 years. Some of them will stay for a long time and do very well. Others, depending on their condition, will move along either to another facility where they can get health care, or they will pass. And I suppose the answer to your question would be 4 or 5 years, 4 or 6 years.
That's very helpful. And one other question. The number of staff during the course of the day, how many staff people are on site? And during the evening when residents are asleep, how many staff people are on site typically?
Right. So there's 3 shifts. There's the day shift, the swing shift, and the knock shift, and they will all be staffed. You're probably concerned with the heaviest shift, and that will be 18 employees, which will be the day shift.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Lezak.
I'd like to just get your take on a couple of the concerns from the community, and those are, the new building will have some HVAC and other elements that may generate noise outside of the activities of the facility. And then there are those portions that are going to generate light within the parking lot and building environment. Can you speak to the concerns of the community about how the noise and the light may affect properties, not specifically the site itself, but perhaps the spillover, potential spillover effect to neighboring properties?
Of course. This is always a concern with all of our projects. And I can tell you that Dr. and Mita Anand are wanting to be good neighbors. So the HVAC, we will have ventilation units. They'll be up in a roof well, so we're not pretending that there's not going to be any impact. It'll be minimal. And I always want to compare this use to medical office or whatever the other zoning would be required when I get questions like this, Commissioner. So with medical office buildings, there will also be ventilation, and there will be hoods, and there can be actually some significant ventilations in those types of uses. So we'll have standard residential air conditioners, and it'll be nothing more or less than what you would see on the apartment building next door. And then in terms of the light, that is really controlled by the Walnut Creek zoning ordinances. The light at nighttime for the parking lot, we'll have security lights there, whether or not it's a residential care facility. The lighting does have to be on to police department requirements. But it won't be any more or less than what would be for a commercial parking lot with another use. I hope, is that a satisfactory answer? I think I answered or tried to answer your question.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you, Counselor. Commissioner.
Any other questions? Yes.
One of the residents also had concerns about traffic. Can you hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. What are the visiting hours? I'm assuming that the residents here don't get visitors at night. There's nobody staying over. Is there certain limitations to how many visitors everyone? Because how many units are there?
There's 39 units.
Because it's
39? There's 39 units, I'm sorry.
Got it.
So in terms of the visiting hours, typically these communities, they don't have standard visiting hours like a hospital would have, because the level of care, the level of treatment is so much less. So if someone's really worried about their mom or dad and they're not satisfied with the answers they're getting from staff, they have the prerogative and actually they're welcome to come and see their residents at any time. I'm sorry, their parents or their loved one at any time. But the way that I see this occurring with all of our clients, which are extensive, we work for Atria and Brookdale and all of the big names, as well as a lot of really loving care providers, as well as a lot of not-for-profits who are benevolent care providers. The way we see this is it's just, you know, you'll see folks coming home from work and going in to see their mom and checking up on them. And that's, you know, they come and go, and it's sort of benign, really. We encourage people, and you know what, in fact, in fact, we want visitors to come, but the fact of the matter is it's a slow trickle. The weekends are obviously busier than the weekdays. You know, everybody has, I'd ask you to consider your own parents if that's appropriate. I don't want to get into your personal life, but if it's appropriate, you know, when would you want to go see your mom? Well, probably when you're on your way home from work, right? And on Saturday, you're going to go pick her up, or your dad, you're going to go pick him up and take him out to, you know, the shopping mall or the Good Times Saloon or whatever you guys love to do. You're going to want to continue that. And that's always encouraged. So it's not like there's a constant flood of visitors. We do see an increase at Christmas time. Mother's Day is a big day. Easter is a big day. Some, you know, Passover is a big day with some of our communities. So just, I would ask you to frame this in your own life. What are the important events in the year for you? And that's when you're going to see an increase in activity.
So basically, you guys have already thought of that. The parking would include not only the workers, the 18 max, but also any potential visitors as well. So there should be really no ramifications to the surrounding neighborhood with visitors.
Commissioner, I would be happy if our parking lot was overflowing and parking spilling into the streets for 2 miles, but that's not what happens. So yes, we have considered that. Thank you. I get that question every time, and I've had 25 years to refine my answer. How did I do?
Any other questions from commissioners? I have one additional, it might be for Haley, regarding the tree removal permit. I know they're taking out 21 and replacing it with 9. Any idea on the size of the 9? Size is?
Other way over
Sorry,
there, so they're taking out 9.
Taking out 9, replacing with.
They are, I believe, primarily 24-inch box. They did provide planting plans, and I'm not sure if they, I do believe we have a requirement that they be 24-inch box a minimum. That's something, you know, DRC is reviewing as part of the final landscape plan.
That's good. I know DRC's on it. It's probably outside of our purview anyway. I was just more curious than anything, but adequate
Yep.
size, that there's a minimum to, so, great. So at this time, we will bring it to any member of the public wish to provide public comments at this time.
Thank you.
We have a few in the chamber. Thank you very much, Mr. Pancake.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Rod Freytag. I submitted some written comments. I live at 1430 Corby Court. It's the single-family residence that shares the majority of the rear property line with 1455 Montego. Our house is elevated above the property line fence. All of our main living areas face out towards the facility. So any noise that happens outside the building, it's like it happens outside our bedroom. So I appreciate the general information on HVAC noise and lighting issues between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., but you know, it still doesn't give me enough information to know that I'm going to be able to sleep at night. You know? So what I've asked the commission to do, to consider if they go forward with the approval, is making that conditioned upon the applicant mitigating sound and noise impacts to adjacent residents. And like I said, for us, we've had lighting issues in the past, we've had noise issues in the past, and it's really a matter of, we would like to be able to sleep at night. And, you know, so I don't know what noise to expect. I don't know how this facility is going to operate, what kind of equipment they're going to install, but it's nighttime operation of the building is something we haven't had it to this point. So this is a new level of noise that's being added. And there were a lot of considerations when the existing facility was put there, and concessions to the neighbors so that we would have a livable area. So please take that into consideration. And really, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Freetag.
Question.
Sure.
You say your house is up above the building, so it looks down on it?
Yeah, actually 1455 Montego, the ground elevation is below all the surrounding residential except for the senior living or the Montego Senior Living Facility to the north. Is that to the north? Yeah.
So, but I mean, so from your house, would you be able to see the roof of the facility or?
From my house, where our living areas, I said they're probably about 8 feet above the ground level of 1455 Montego. So even this wall they're talking about, that doesn't even
I was
figure
gonna-
into
I was going to say that,
rooftop noise.
right, I mean, you're not going to build a 30-foot wall there for you, so.
Yeah.
So you're really looking at some kind of attenuation immediately around the sources.
Yeah, and on their drawing A10, they show that they're putting louvered metal enclosures around whatever they put on the roof, but that's not going to do anything to attenuate sound.
Probably right there.
Yeah, and then as far as the parking lot lighting, you know, I know there's a certain police requirement, but there's also was a certain requirement previously to maintain or to alleviate the lighting issues to the neighbors. So, you know, I'm sure that can be addressed, but I just don't know how it's going to be done at this point. So
Thank you.
that's why I'm asking for the conditions to make sure that it does get addressed.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thanks, Mr. Freetag.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else in the chamber wish to come up and speak?
My name is Nancy Wallace, and my property adjoins the property that we're discussing. The fence, the existing fence is what is separating us. And I would very much object to a concrete fence of any kind. Also, the property that is further up is open space. And the other thing that concerns me is the parking. At this point, every car has a stall. They're all filled, where no one has ever mentioned what's going to become of the cars. And a lot of them have cars. I realize they don't all do, but there are a lot of cars. So I have no idea where that parking is fitting into the existing plan right now. So, any questions?
I think we're good. Thank you, Mrs. Wallace. Anybody else in the chamber would like to address the commission? I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody online?
There's one attendee online, but not raising their hand, so I would.
I think your mic's off.
Geez, I finally did that. There is one attendee online who's not raising their hand. I'll give them a chance to hit the raise hand button to see if they do wish to provide public comment, and they are not doing so. If I might, before this returns to the commission, I have some information that can follow up actually from what Commissioner Pickett had asked regarding the size of those buildings, the vacant buildings across the way that have frontage on Montego and Ignatia Valley Road. I looked up county records, and there's approximately 120,000 square feet of floor area in those three buildings that he referenced.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, so at this time, we'll bring it back to the applicant and see if they'd like to address any of the concerns that were raised or answer any questions, any further clarifications. Are we still on?
I can answer this.
Great.
Oh, I can.
You should be able.
We can hear you loud and clear. We'll bring you on.
There we go.
Here I am. Can you see me now?
We can.
I have trouble with control and people are not letting me get on. So, very, very good questions from very lovely neighbors. Rod came up and he was concerned about sleeping at night and the noise that was going to be emitted from the site or that was going to transmit from the site. You know, we don't live in the open desert and there's going to be something there. So you are going to have a neighbor. we're doing a remodel, so I can't take credit as the architect for siding the building the way we did. But we have a parking lot between the single family neighborhood. Our parking lot separates and buffers us from that. We have the adjoining neighborhood, that's the multifamily neighborhood with a huge parking lot. So we're actually separated pretty far to begin with. So I just want to point that out to begin with to kind of frame our understanding of the site. Again, with medical office building use, and again, I don't know if this is appropriate for me to compare what you could have there, but medical office can have laboratory, can have hoods, can have some pretty strong exhaust systems, right? We're not going to have anything like that. We are going to have a kitchen that's going to prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's a small kitchen. It's it's only serving 78 beds, and that's the maximum. So it's not like it's going to be a big restaurant that's going to be running 24/7. We are going to, let's see, Rod mentioned that he noted our mechanical screening, which was a louvered. Those louvers are designed not only to hide it visually, but to also reduce the sound while giving ventilation to the equipment. So we're doing everything that the industry can provide for us to install the appropriate systems and make them the least amount of impact possible. So we're not taking it lightly. And then the lighting, it's so subjective. And we're required to meet minimum standards with the city of Walnut Creek for security purposes and for parking purposes. And irrespective of whether or not we're a medical office building, a strip mall, a movie theater, whatever, we're going to have these minimum standards illuminating our parking lot for the police department. But it will be the minimum standards, and we don't take it lightly, and we go really, really far to make sure we're good neighbors and there's no spotlight shining in anybody's windows. Nancy was concerned about the fence. The fence is, it's interesting because of all of the topics that we've talked about through planning and we've overcome. The fence has become one of the biggest ones. And again, if you take anything away from my presentation and my presentation, we want to be good neighbors, and we're going to design a fence that we can all work with. Nancy wants her residential fence. Frankly, from our client's perspective, that's the least expensive thing to do. We can work with that. We can work with the 8-foot wall, which we think is a little bit beyond what is residential in nature, which is what we're trying to create. But frankly, the 8-foot fence helps with our security, and it'll create a more secure environment for our elders here. So I don't have an answer for that. I think I do have an answer. I really like the language that Haley has added to our conditions of approval, that we have the flexibility and the opportunity to work with the neighbors. I know the Anons would not, or they would welcome that. So I guess that remains to be seen what that will do, but we'll do whatever we can come up with. And then the parking. Let me speak to Nancy personally. I can tell you, Nancy, that none of these residents will be driving their cars. They're going to be, the average age of our residents is going to be 83, 84 years old. They're going to be moving into this community because they are not old and frail enough to go into a healthcare facility, but they are old and frail enough that they've lost some of their autonomy, and driving is one of those. So in these communities, across the board with all of my clients, the assisted living and memory care residents do not drive. And every once in a while, in a rare circumstance, and it's like one every 7 or 8 years, someone will be so demanding or connected to their car that they'll bring it. But then it creates another issue where you'll find a car with the parked in the parking lot, the tires will be going out, and there's spider webs all over it. So it just doesn't happen. And, you know, that creates sort of a management problem for our clients. But in terms of a parking problem or parking demand, it's not caused by the residents. The parking demand is not, the residents aren't considered for the parking. The staff, the visitors, the visiting, you know, clinicians, and I think I spoke to the other commissioner, we would love it if the parking overflowed into the street, but it just doesn't happen. And the National Highway Association, National Society of Highway Engineers, I forget what they're called, but they've done lots of research. We fit within their guidelines, we fit within the city guidelines, and ordinances. So parking is not going to be an issue. And I think I covered all of those, or all of the questions. Are there any questions for me, or anything I can?
I think you covered the questions that were brought up at the dais. Noise, wall, parking. So thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Pancake. At this time, we will, if there are no other, we will bring it back to the commission for deliberation, additional questions, or perhaps even a motion. Commissioner Anderson.
Just a question for staff. With respect to the lighting, are there conditions? I know that there, especially for parking lot lighting, you can shield the bulbs so that they illuminate the parking lot only, you know, aside from a minor leakage or reflection that they don't shine anywhere else. Is that part of the conditions that would be placed on this project?
As part of the final design review approval, we do have standard conditions that all light sources be shielded and downcast, and we also have requirements that there's no spillover of any light onto adjacent properties. So that's all will be conditioned as part of our standard design review.
And I would also add the light and glare are two issues that are specifically called out by the zoning ordinance for the Design Review Commission to take into consideration for their design review approval.
Great. Commissioner Strongman.
Yes, along those lines, is there any way we could increase the sound dampening of the HVAC on the roofs, closer to the roofs, or to the extra equipment?
Are you talking about moving the screens closer to the equipment?
Not, make it more sound dampening. Is there, or can we do that? Is it feasible first, and can we ask for it second?
In terms of it's feasible, I know that there are clearance requirements, you know, from these pieces of equipment to screening, and I'm not aware of kind of all the technicalities. I think, you know, at least asking that they consider and kind of maximize all of the ways that they can achieve mitigation. We, in terms of requirements, only require for screening, it addresses the visibility, blocking visibility of the units. It doesn't necessarily address noise, at least in terms of our design guidelines. But certainly if there's measures we could add and condition, that would be, wouldn't go against any sort of, you know, installation guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could draw on about 3 careers ago, my acoustical expertise. When you have a masonry wall will certainly do it, but when you have a situation where you need to ventilate, necessarily you cannot have that blockage of sound. You can, you know, louvers and some treatment inside, you know, the box, if you will, you can do some, but as long as you're ventilating, and that's probably most important, you've got to limit it to what you can do.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Pickett.
I was an acoustical engineer at the same time he was. Couple of careers ago. Actually, I'm not an acoustical engineer, but I do have some experience with that. One thing is we do have a parapet wall, and the sound is blocked by solid masses, and the parapet wall is a solid mass. And so if you just think of a line, it's not 100% line of sight with acoustics, but the sound is kind of more going up because of the parapet wall that's there. And number two, I'd be reluctant to approve any or make any recommendation for changes when we don't have an acoustical study to support it being valid. Okay. We're not acoustical engineers, and we can't say it's going to make it better if we move it closer. And just my experience, I mean, current equipment is more efficient and probably quieter than old equipment that's, you know, getting a little rattly in the bearings and everything else. So I think it's probably an issue that, you know, with normal construction, new equipment, the standards of practice, that the sound would be reasonably mitigated as designed. So I'd be reluctant to do anything, and, you know, we can point it out to DRC or something, they can look at it, but without statistical information saying this is going to improve it, I wouldn't want to go that direction, so.
Great, anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Lezak.
I'd like to motion to approve the conditional use permits and tree removal permit for application number Y 21-050 Montego Senior Living at 1455 Montego, based on the revised resolution, including the red lines from staff.
I've been reminded that we technically have to do two motions.
Oh, they have to be two separate, so
Two resolutions.
so we'll start with the conditional use permit.
Okay,
That'll be my
I'll
first.
second it.
it's been motioned and seconded. Can we call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Needing,
Aye?
Commissioner Lezak,
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
And Chair Reiser.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, since I'm on a roll, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the resolution for the tree removal permit for the application number, I'm guessing it's still Y 21-050 for the Montego Senior Living, 1455 Montego. Don't believe that I have a revised resolution in front of me, so we'll just go with what was proposed by staff.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we record the vote?
Yes, Commissioner Needing,
Yes.
Commissioner Lezak.
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
and Chair Reiser.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Terrific. Thank you much. Next up, that was our only project on, so we'll go to commission considerations. Are there any considerations?
We have nothing on the agenda for that tonight.
All right, very good. And lastly, commission member and staff reports or announcements. Are there any reports from the commissioners or staff? Yes, Commissioner
I wanted
Anderson.
to note that as of a couple of weeks ago, I was appointed to the Design Review Board of the Loretto Bay, Baja California Sewer development. Turns out to be a lot more work
Need any
than this.
expert consultants down there?
We'll talk later.
Congratulations. All right. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for their.
Oh.
Oop,
One
yes.
more. Next week, I will be attending the Planning Commission Academy down in San Ramon.
Oh, nice. Commissioner Lezak and I did that down in Long Beach. Yeah, it's a good day. Time well spent.
This was great.
Great. Thanks to the commission, thanks to staff, thanks to everybody for listening and watching. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just
goodness.
a heads up, our next regularly scheduled meeting would be on March 24th. However, we actually don't have anything lined up on the agenda for that, so you should expect to see a cancellation notice in the mail for that one, which then would presumably mean our next meeting will be on April 14th, which is a little while from now. So just wanted to share that news.
Awesome. Great. That's it. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Well, I got an easy one, Street first.